Hey, good morning. Welcome, everybody. This is the California Housing Partnership's annual Affordable Housing Electrification Training Series. We got a real quick poll there that is should be popped up for you. I'm just trying to get a little bit of idea of the background and the audience that we have today. So if you want to fill that out while we're doing introductions, that would be pretty cool. So yeah, thank you everybody for attending. Um, at the California Housing Partnership, we are, here to support affordable housing developers in the state of California. Um, Mainly, we work with financial consulting, but we also do a lot of work on sustainability. And today's um, webinar will be kind of hitting the intersection of both of those. So we will be discussing the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund with some key updates for implementation in California. As you can see on the screen, we've got 4 sessions in this series. The first one is today, August 29th. We also got coming up on September 5th, a session on planning and financing all electric new construction. On September 19th, we will have planning and financing all electric rehabilitations. And then on September 26th, we'll be rounding it out with understanding electrification, technology, operations, and maintenance. So we've got a lot of great folks from the Association for Energy Affordability who will be on as trainers in the upcoming sessions. But today, we've got some really exciting updates from folks who are um, really involved with implementation of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a really exciting new source of funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. We'll discuss it a little bit more, but right now I want to thank our sponsors and program partners who without them, none of this work would be possible. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank the Wells Fargo Foundation for providing financial support for this webinar series. We'd also like to thank the Energy Efficiency for All Coalition for their support. And then finally, I'd like to thank the Low Income Weatherization Program, the Building Initiative for Low Emissions Development Program, and the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing Program from the state of California, as well as the Comprehensive Affordable Multifamily Retrofit Program from Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. So these are programs that we'll be discussing in more depth as the series goes on. But for now, I would like to introduce you to some of the folks working on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So, as a little bit of background, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is part of the Biden-Harris administration's Inflation Reduction Act, which created a first of its kind national scale program to invest $27 billion in mobilizing financing and private capital to address the climate crisis, ensure economic competitiveness for the United States, and promote energy independence while also delivering lower energy costs and economic revitalization to communities that have historically been left behind. This fund has 3 major components. It's got the National Clean Investment Fund, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and the Solar for All program. Uh, in the interest of time, we'll kind of skip over Solar for All and CCIA for today, mainly because there's not a lot of information available on how those are going to be implemented yet. But what we do have is some excellent representatives from the National Clean Investment Fund awardees. As a bit of background for the NCIF, this is a $14 billion investment with 3 selected applicants for national clean financing institutions. We've got Climate United Fund with a $6.7 billion award, the Coalition for Green Capital with a $5 billion award, and the Power Forward Communities with a $2 billion award. And what this fund is really intended to do is to deliver accessible, affordable financing for clean technology projects nationwide, partnering with the private sector investors, developers, community organizations, and others to deploy projects, mobilize private capital at scale, and enable millions of Americans to benefit from the program through energy bill savings, cleaner air, job creation, and more. There's a whole lot of things that are going to be funded through the NCIF, which we will be discussing today. But in general, one of the things that is common to all of these is that they are aiming for a 20% energy savings threshold for the developments and projects that they are going to be working through. But there will be specifics for each organization and product. And so with that, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. Uh, for representing the Climate United, we have Atalia Howe, who is Vice President of Initiatives and Impact Investing at the Community Preservation Corporation. Representing Power Forward, we have Krista Egger, Vice President of Building Resilient Futures at Enterprise Community Partners, as well as Anna Smukowski, Senior Director of Capital Programs at Enterprise Community Loan Fund. And then rounding out our panel, we have our own Jesse Ozanian, who is a senior financial consultant here at the California Housing Partnership, who will be discussing a little bit how the NCIF funds can interact with other tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act to really maximize the benefits for your developments. So with that, let's take a look at some of the poll results. In terms of how would you describe your level of experience with electrification? Looks like we've got a good mix here. Not a lot of respondents who are saying they are very experienced, so hopefully this is enlightening for you all. We do have mainly developers, project managers, and consultants here, so that is important. And then in terms of the geographical spread, we have a good number of people.
Ian, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're only seeing the slides with the sponsorship.
Yes. Yeah.
We're still on that slide. Okay, just wanted to make sure you weren't sharing any other slides. Because
Yep.
we're still seeing only the sponsorship. Okay, thanks.
That's the idea. So yeah, so speaking of moving on to other slides, I'd like to hand it over now to Atalia Howe.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it. And you can all hear me okay? Okay, great. Following some technical difficulties earlier. So just want to say a big thanks to California Housing Partnership for hosting this terrific webinar series and for the opportunity to present to you all today. My name, as Ian mentioned, is Atalia Howe, and until recently I was the Vice President of Initiatives and Impact Investing, overseeing all of our sustainability initiatives at the Community Preservation Corporation, or CPC. We are a national nonprofit multifamily affordable housing finance company and community development financial institution, or CDFI, and we were founded in 1974. So actually this year is our 50th year anniversary. And recently I've now just stepped into a new role, which I'll be kind of highlighting today, and our work going forward as Senior Vice President of Program Management for CPC Climate Capital, which is the newly formed subsidiary of CPC, created to drive our execution of the Climate United multifamily strategy. So we'll kind of get into that. So thanks, Ian, for advancing. So Climate United is a coalition of 3 national nonprofits with a combined 110 years experience delivering financial products and services that leverage public resources and private capital. And we were really formed to take advantage of this greenhouse gas reduction fund opportunity, specifically under the National Clean Investment Fund, as Ian introduced earlier. Next slide. I've got quite a few to get through. So I'm going to go through these first ones very quickly. If you are interested in learning more, or if there's anything I haven't gotten into in these introductory slides, you can find more information at weareclimateunited.org. But just gonna go through these relatively quickly. So Calvert Impact, just introducing the 3 nonprofits, is a global nonprofit investment firm with a 28-year track record driving financial, social, environmental returns. I introduced the CPC, and that's who I sit with. And then Self-Help is a national nonprofit leader providing financing, consumer financial services, and advocacy since 1980. Next slide, please. So as we know, teamwork makes the dream work. And so we have partnered with and will be relying on a national network of hundreds of local, regional, and national partners to help us deploy this capital into communities. And we know that that takes a kind of a wide range of partners. So we will be leveraging, those existing relationships that they have on the ground, and strengthening, hopefully, and kind of bolstering some of those relationships again to get this money out the door. Next slide, please. And I highlighted here, so CPC Climate Capital is that new subsidiary under the Community Preservation Corporation, really created to drive the execution of the multifamily strategy within Climate United Fund. Next slide, please. So just high level National Clean Investment Fund. So as Ian highlighted at the start, there were 3 distinct funds under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. National Clean Investment Fund was $14 billion, a competitive grant competition. There were three awardees or recipients: Climate United, Power Forward will both be presenting today, and then Coalition for Green Capital. And this fund is really focused on providing financial assistance. So essentially everything and anything but grants to qualified projects. And we'll kind of get into what that definition, the EPA definition is of a qualified project later on. And this is really focused on scaling replicable models, where CCIA, that other fund that Ian highlighted, is more focused on seeding kind of local project development and enabling and developing qualified projects so that they can come over to NCIF and access project financing. So they're really designed to work together. A requirement is at least 40% of investments must be made in low income and disadvantaged communities. Climate United, we have committed to investing a minimum of 60% of our award in low income and disadvantaged communities. As I mentioned, all dollars must support qualified projects. They must go into projects as financial assistance, so anything but grants. And the financing can be direct into a project or through or alongside a community lender. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking high level at our portfolio. Next slide. So we have chosen to focus on market segments that really will have the biggest impact on GHG reduction, as well as creating tangible benefits to people's lives and the potential for market transformation. So, everything from consumer to small business, multifamily is our kind of bread and butter here at CPC Climate Capital, but we'll also be focused on schools and MSIs, community infrastructure, and community solar and other electric vehicles. Next slide, please. So in terms of our strategic pillars, and these really align with the EPA goals when they kind of created this fund. So the goal is to shift existing credit markets to incorporate decarbonization at the time of origination. So we know that we need to create new green jobs. Obviously, that's very important to accelerating the transition to a clean energy economy. But we also simply need to green the existing jobs, and I think this is particularly true in the financial sector. And so our kind of premise all along has been, let's leverage the first mortgage markets as a way of that is the capital that most directly impacts the physical quality of buildings, and so that is the kind of the longest term, lowest rate capital in the market. Let's leverage that infrastructure to get money to make housing both affordable and sustainable, and that's obviously going to take some transformation and some time, but that is one of the goals of the program and one of our goals at Climate United. Secondly is to work through a platform of partners, reaching into existing portfolios of assets on lender balance sheets. So housing finance agencies, CDFIs, they obviously have connections and originate first mortgages on their own. And I'll get into our products a bit in a minute. But we will be leveraging those existing networks to deploy the capital. And last but not least, we plan to leverage local partners as well. We know that there's boots on the ground doing really important work today, and we intend to partner with them and learn from them and help support communities with this unique source of capital through those existing relationships. Next slide, please. So just briefly, if you're trying to figure out, again, we highlighted many market segments. Climate United as a coalition is covering all of the market segments that were highlighted in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund opportunity. Specifically for multifamily housing, that is where CPC Climate Capital will be focusing its origination efforts. Next slide, please. So high level on our multifamily approach. Next slide. So the kind of the basic premise is that we will be providing low cost debt financing to decrease the overall cost of mortgage capital while increasing proceeds to cover the costs of meeting the required performance standards. And I'll get into the performance standards on the next slides. So essentially, at a major capitalization event, you're accessing first mortgage capital. Our capital would be provided alongside the first mortgage capital, subordinate, completely subordinate, fully subordinate in the capital stack to all other capital, and provided at really low cost rates. And the goal is that this would help incentivize the drive to decarbonization, will help cover that incremental cost of decarbonizing. We know that today that those technologies to electrify building systems and make existing buildings more energy efficient, there is an incremental cost associated with that. Eventually, we hope that will become cost competitive and cost parity with just fossil fuel based systems, but we know that there is an increased cost today. So again, the focus is to provide that low cost debt financing and very, very subordinate in the capital stack. In terms of our financial products, we're focused on pre-development. So we know that this is, often a kind of a challenge for folks that are looking to get involved in the decarbonization space, completing feasibility studies. So, energy audits and decarbonization, physical needs assessments, creating zero over time. So if you can't quite get to those zero emissions now, how can you get there over time, and charting that kind of course to get to net zero emissions? Feasibility studies for solar, and design and engineering support. There's real costs associated with it, those kind of soft costs before you even get to construction, and that can make or break a project, right? And that influences obviously the scope. So we will have a product specifically designed for that at well below market rates, and I think we're thinking about a 3-year term for those loans, and this will be for qualified projects in low income and disadvantaged communities, and we're intending to launch that first. So that will be this fall in 2024. That product will become available. Our direct lending and our loan purchases will roll out later. We were just formally awarded. We just finalized the terms and conditions with the EPA 2 weeks ago. So we are all still kind of actively developing term sheets. We hope to share those with the market soon. But again, this gives you some idea. So direct lending would be CPC Climate Capital providing direct loans to projects to support construction or permanent debt financing. And then there's an option for loan purchases where we would be purchasing permanent debt. So someone else provides a construction loan and we're just simply purchasing that permanent debt on post construction. In all of these cases, they would have to meet our performance standards, which is perfect. This is this slide. So this is our performance standard, as Ian kind of highlighted at the outset. The minimum threshold to kind of participate is that 20% energy reduction or 1 ton carbon per unit annually. And that can kind of get a bit tricky, and we understand there's a bit of explanation there, but just think for the time being, 20% energy reduction, that's the kind of the lowest tier for existing buildings. Now, if you want to go a bit further, and you'll get a steeper discount on that interest, you could access clean air, and that's a 35% energy reduction and would require all electric. So all electric major building systems and appliances. And if you want to go a step further, it would be our clean air boost, which is again that 35% energy savings, all electric, and would be powered solely by renewable energy. We understand with multifamily, it's often difficult to offset 100% of your on-site electric consumption with solar. And so we would be open, and we're reviewing market mechanisms like RECs and other things to be able to achieve that zero emissions building target. But even if you can't achieve that, we've got clean air and save a ton. And then for new construction, it's very ambitious. It's that clean air boost, which aligns with the DOE zero emissions building standard. Next slide. So this is just a sample for demonstrative purposes only. This is a 250. This is a real building, but just highlighting it here. So there's 250 units. It's in Dallas, Texas. It is in a low income and disadvantaged community, and that's the EPA broad definition. So that applies to both subsidized affordable, unsubsidized affordable, and then there's geographic definitions for what qualifies as a low income and disadvantaged community. But for this purpose, it is in one of those communities. The property values, $22.5 million, and the cost to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction was scoped. So following pre-development work in that building decarb study, $4.5 million to put in high efficiency heat pumps, do insulation and air sealing, put in smart building controls, and do a solar installation on the roof. So this would meet our clean air standard. And so you can see they're accessing first mortgage capital at about a 6% rate. Again, for demonstrative purposes only, and it's a healthy building in terms of economics. So they are able to access that second mortgage second mortgage, which would be, completely subordinate in the capital stack at a rate of, let's say, 2%. And that 4.5 million, as you can see, ties out to the cost to achieve that greenhouse gas reduction. So they could access that second mortgage capital to cover the costs of the decarbonization scope. And again, because of the low rate, they stay within the kind of the required, usually first mortgage kind of dictates that loan to value and the debt service coverage ratio. High level, and then I'm getting to the end because I want to pass the baton along. Community engagement and accountability strategy. It's really, next slide, it's just a loop. It's a feedback loop. We're going to be obviously centering beneficiaries in our program and product design, thinking about workforce and how can we tap into, the communities that we're serving and the buildings that we're serving with these funds, and how can we kind of help train them so that they can actually be doing the installations and doing the feasibility studies and some of those things. So always thinking about the beneficiaries and how this capital flows and the impacts that it can have. We'll be leveraging trusted community infrastructure for capital deployment and listening and iterating based on that feedback. So that will be an ongoing feedback loop. And our market building strategy, next slide, please. So the goal really here, our mission, is to ensure that all of our pipeline and transaction partners have the tools and support necessary to carry out projects across sectors. And it's going to take a really like a holistic approach to get this money out the door. And so there's capital demand side market building, which we're going to do, which is, awareness and demand generation, like I'm doing here today, and trying to get the word out on the fact that these funds are real. They will be available starting very soon, and describing how you can access them. Obviously, education outreach is huge. What is decarbonization? And then on the lender side, how do you underwrite a green loan? Like what, underwriting green 101. What are the things that, how can building owners meet our performance standards and so on. There's the pre-development, which I highlighted. Obviously, that's key to project feasibility and project scoping, and then capital supply side market building. So that's on the lender side, right? That's really like the market transformation, the capital markets transformation that needs to occur as well. So just timeline and next steps. We are through contracting with the EPA, which is momentous. And initial deployment and program launches, we're in that phase right now. So between, I guess it's almost September. So in the fall, we'll really be, finalizing our term sheets and getting that information out there on our products, and our intake form will be up on our website soon. So again, we are paving the road as we're driving down it, but we are preparing actively for a robust pipeline, and we're going to really hit the ground running in Q1 of 2025. Next slide. So this is my last slide, and I'll pass it over. So next steps, we are going to be continually hosting conversations and presenting at events and getting the information out there in the coming weeks and months. But if you'd like to, please join our newsletter. The link is there. You can also just find more information on us on weareclimateunited.org. And we hope to hear from many of you soon. So thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Atalia. Also, quick reminder, we do have Q&A at the end, so be sure to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we will get to them. So with that, let's head on over to Power Forward. Go ahead and take it away.
Great. You can go down to the next slide. And the next one. So Power Forward Communities is a coalition of trusted national organizations in the affordable housing industry. Together, we have a broad local reach with over 10,000 plus employees, local chapters and affiliates, and partner organizations like yourselves across the country. We have deep financial expertise in the affordable housing industry, deploying $13 billion in capital through tax credits, debt, and equity last year. PFC's core partners are Rewiring America, Enterprise, Local Initiative Support Corporation, Habitat for Humanity, and United Way Worldwide. Rewiring America is a leading electrification nonprofit founded by experts with years of experience in climate science and market transformation. Enterprise and LISC are the largest nonprofit lenders in the multifamily housing and provide local organizations with the capacity building and technical assistance they need to decarbonize affordable housing. And then Habitat for Humanity is one of the largest nonprofit builders of affordable single-family homes in the U.S. Then United Way, our last partner, is deeply embedded in communities across the country, building deep multi-sector partnerships to advance housing and economic mobility. I will level set today that most of the discussion is going to be on our multifamily strategy, not single family. So if you have questions related to that, you can reach out through Power Forward Communities website to learn more. You can go to the next slide. So we bring a highly complementary set of capabilities, relationships, and experiences to make market transformation happen. Through our networks, we reached out to over 150 communities and 150 transaction partners across the EPA regions. Those are the numbers that are 1 through 10 highlighted in the slides, and committing to decarbonize affordable housing. We're really committed to also making sure that there's equitable deployment of funds across EPA's regions to show that this can work across the nation. You can go to slide 5. Yeah. And so this slide is part of our initial application to just guide and level set some of our guiding allocation principles. So the majority of our award will be through financial assistance, which is defined as financial products excluding grant funding, with the remainder being market building, pre-development, and administration costs. Through our award, we target a minimum of 75% of our award to low-income and disadvantaged communities, that LIDAC term that Atalia was discussing earlier. We also committed to achieving a $53 per metric ton of CO2 emissions reductions. And then we're looking to calculate the reductions on a portfolio basis to ensure support for projects in historically underinvested communities. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about our allocation strategy and how it transforms and translates into financial products. Next slide. I know this is a lot of text, and we are going to the slides are going to be shared after, so hopefully that gives you a little bit more time to absorb everything. But the allocation principles are guiding our financial products. The suite of products that can be employed across the priority project categories for the multifamily sector are going to serve as additional subsidy in the capital stack, incentivizing the adoption of clean energy measures and addressing other gaps in deep energy projects where possible. And again, for this slide, I'm focusing on our projects that are focused to multifamily affordable housing. So we plan to tailor investment for individual borrowers and projects based on impact. The larger the per unit support and more favorable terms will be based on the project impact, and that may include lower interest rates, longer terms, and a forgivable component based on certain products. Below is a high-level overview of who we're going to look to provide financing to: nonprofit and for-profit developers of affordable housing and community facilities, including renewable energy projects. And then the suite of products are going to be designed to meet the needs of the affordable housing developers, which again will include flexible underwriting criteria, low rate, long-term, primarily subordinate, including interest only and cash flow contingent loans. And then we're also going to structure a forgivable component for certain projects based on impact. And then you can see how it's going to serve as additional subsidy in the capital stack. We're looking at our funding representing 20 to 30% of total development costs, which we're hoping will help plug both the gaps that a project may have to incur the additional expenses related to electrification, as well as some of the additional federal compliance that the funds will trigger. And then we're also looking to have lower leverage of total development costs and a lower private capital mobilization ratio. And then we're going to really try to customize some of the terms based on the impact of a project. And some of the things that we're looking at prioritizing is the depth of affordability, the extent of decarbonization, and then really looking at products that can help small to medium multifamily properties, as well as unsubsidized affordable properties, as well as, again, that 75% of our financing being in low-income and disadvantaged communities in rural and tribal areas. So we are piloting our terms with a couple of finance-ready pipeline transactions to really understand what will work as these funds begin to flow to projects. For now, for projects that are interested in learning more, we're asking for partners to complete the intake form available on Power Forward's website. I'm now going to pass it to Krista, who's going to talk about how our subsidy products overlap with green building standards. And some of this, I think, will be similar to what Atalia said, so hopefully it will sink in a little bit more.
Thanks, Anna. And yeah, thanks for Climate Housing Partnership Coalition for having us today and providing this opportunity to share together with Climate United about how this source of funding can be a really powerful way of moving forward with affordable housing financing, in addition to reaching our climate goals. So what you see here are 6 different categories of building performance requirements that match up with the different capital products that we'll be providing. As both Ian and Atalia shared earlier, the bar to entry is at least a 20% improvement in energy performance for existing buildings to be considered a qualified project and receive financing through our program. One distinction between Power Forward communities, which Anna and I are speaking about compared to Climate United or the Coalition for Green Capital, is that all of our products, all of Power Forward's products, are explicitly geared towards the residential sector. As Anna shared, what we're sharing with you here is solely multifamily. But as you move from the bar to entry of at least a 20% energy improvement, which you're seeing in category 1 there for existing buildings, to as you move to the category 3 descriptions, whether for existing buildings or for new construction, the amount of subsidy will increase as the stringency of the building performance requirements increases as well. Essentially, the category 3 requirements align with the new federal definition for zero emissions buildings. So that's the ultimate bar that we're seeking, although there are a few steps from our entry point to there that should be applicable for different projects depending on where they are in their financing cycles and their need for capital improvement. So you can move on to the next slide. I just wanted to share that in addition to providing the capital, Power Forward communities, similarly to Climate United, will also be providing market building supports for the sector. Primarily, our market building activities are going to be geared towards owners and operators of affordable multifamily housing across the country and their associated stakeholders and teams. The goal of our market building approach is to build the capacity of owners of multifamily affordable housing to achieve zero emissions within their properties and portfolios, and to ensure that our collective Power Forward approach exceeds our Justice 40 commitments. The different types of strategies that we'll be using for market building, kind of spanning into pre-development as well, include a suite of resources that we'll be releasing related to zero over time planning and decarbonization in the context of affordable housing. These sorts of resources will be available online, available to anyone and everyone to download, use 24/7 from a web platform. We'll also be releasing different series of training curriculums in partnership between Enterprise and LIST. Some of these will be online and nationally available. Others will be in person in certain markets across the country. And then we'll also be providing one-on-one project support as we get towards the pre-development phase to help finance solar feasibility assessments, decarbonization audits, and more as projects are gearing up to actually become financeable. So you can go to the next slide. And here's our timeline slide, very similar to what Atalia shared for Climate United. But as you can see, we got the notice of award about 2 weeks ago. We'll be using the remainder of this year to firm up our program design and our capital products, to do a few pilots. And then we expect that the funds and our market development activities will really begin flowing in early 2025 in the first quarter. And we have a 7-year period of performance, although we hope to be able to extend the length of this program beyond that, based on the success of our work in between. So you can go to the next slide. And these next few slides are relevant to all of the GGRF and more specifically the NCIF awardees. These can be for your reference after this presentation. This slide is another overview of the 3 different competitions within GGRF. You can go to the next slide. These 3 definitions here are how EPA has defined priority projects. priority projects are the types of projects that the CCIA awardees can fund, as well as NCIF. So going from distributed energy generation and storage, net zero buildings, to zero emissions transportation. If we go to the next slide, there's another category of projects called qualified projects that NCIF awardees can fund in addition to the priority projects. There's a definition for those. It has 6 components that you see here, but I'm not going to go into detail for that right now. We can go on to the next slide, where you'll see the different ways that EPA is defining whether or not a property is located in a community that they deem low income and disadvantaged. There are 4 different ways to evaluate that apply across all of the awardees in this competition. And then finally, we've got a last slide after this one that shares some of the federal requirements that will be in place for any property receiving the GGRF funding in the NCIF and CCAA context. For instance, Davis-Bacon, the National Historic Preservation Act, Build America, Buy America, Uniform Relocation Assistance are all going to be part of the picture for properties that are receiving the GGRF funds at this point in time. So just want to reiterate that this is an exciting new program that we cannot wait to get off the ground and start engaging with you all on. We'll be refining the materials this fall and really excited to get in the market starting Q1. And our website is powerforwardcommunities.org if you'd like to learn more or sign up on the intake form. So that's it for me. Thanks, Ian.
All right, thank you all. I'm gonna pass it over to Jesse now to round out our presentation for today, and then we'll go into Q&A.
Sure, thanks, Ian. My name is Jesse Ozanian. I'm a senior financial consultant at California Housing Partnership. I think Ian touched on California Housing Partnership and who we are a little bit earlier, but we do provide financial consulting, policy and research for preservation and sustainable housing, and technical assistance for sustainable housing and funding programs. Here's an agenda. You just heard about the very exciting components of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and the products that will be online soon to help incentivize green technologies on multifamily properties. I'll be talking about renewable energy tax credits, which is another tool that incentivizes green technologies for businesses through tax credits, which can directly translate into direct project equity. So here's a quick agenda that I'll be covering. You can move on to the next slide and the next slide. So here's some quick basics of what this program is. So going way back, tax credits provide a dollar-to-dollar reduction in tax liability. And these are typically purchased by an investor or organizations with large tax liability, right? Nonprofits can't really take advantage of tax credits because they're nonprofit, they don't pay taxes, and they don't have that tax liability. This program, specifically renewable energy tax credits, was created in 2005, and it was renewed in 2022 with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Again, it helps incentivize businesses to invest in green technologies. This is specific to businesses, although there is a very similar program out there for residential, but Section 48 of the Internal Revenue Code, which is what we'll be discussing today, is just for businesses. And the tax credit is generated from basis, and we'll get into that in just a second. Next slide, thank you. So what can generate this renewable energy tax credit? Well, there's certain eligible energy properties. Most relevant to our field include solar panels, solar hot water, and energy storage, although there's a whole bunch of other eligible properties we just don't see as often, and probably won't see small wind at one of our residential multifamily properties, but who knows? Next slide. And then this has been referred to many different things. ITC, the industry is kind of it's now calling it renewable energy tax credits, or RETCs. So that's what I'll be referring to, but these are just all different terminology of the same thing. Calculating the RETC, so this is probably the best way to understand what it is and what it could mean for your project in terms of equity. So to calculate this credit, you really have to look at the energy property basis, which is the hard cost, labor and materials, plus all the soft costs related to the energy property work. Soft costs can include design, engineering, permits, construction loan interest, developer fee, all of that fun stuff associated with the system. You should probably work with the CPA when determining this credit. Make sure that all of them seem like they're in line. You're going to be reporting to the IRS, so you want to have a good handle on that. You take that amount and then you multiply it. Or actually, next slide, Ian. So here's just a quick example of what that could look like. Hard costs at $850, soft costs at $150,000. Developer fee at $150,000 for a total energy property basis $1.15 million. All right, next slide. Next slide. So we'll get into this a little bit if we have time, but for this quick example, we're just going to be assuming that the taxable portion of the owner is 100%. Next slide. All right, renewable energy tax credit percentage is 30%. With the passage of the IRA, this percentage increased to 30%. It was actually previously in a step down period. I think in 2022 it was at 26% and it was headed to 22. But with the passage, it set this credit rate at 30% until 2032. So we have 8 years of this 30% credit rating. There's a quick caveat that it's only applicable if the system net output is less than 1 megawatt. 1 megawatt's pretty large. So I think most of the projects that we work on will clear that bar pretty easily. If the system is greater than 1 megawatt, you do have to meet certain prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. And there are credit bonuses, which we'll get into in just a second. So here's just a quick calculation. $1.15 million of hard and soft cost times 30% basically equals a renewable energy tax credit of $345,000. Now, this is a tax credit. It's not direct equity, so you do have to sell it somehow or get benefit out of it. Typically in the LIHTC world, we sell these to our investors and they pay us, around 95 cents on the dollar. So it's a little bit less in direct equity we receive, but it's a pretty substantial amount. It covers about 30% of the system. So this is very beneficial for folks that are considering solar on their multifamily residential properties. Next slide. Here's some new rules associated with the Inflation Reduction Act. I already talked about the 30% credit increase. Another big rule is that the renewable energy tax credits no longer reduces the LIHTC eligible basis, which was in effect prior to this the passage of this new legislation. So what that means is that if you develop a system, you're already going in for low-income housing tax credits. You can use this basis to generate both the low-income housing tax credits and the renewable energy tax credits, which is a big boost. And we have a slide on that in just a second. The guidance also introduced credit bonuses, and then there's new, easier ways to utilize this credit, whereas it was pretty hard. Well, it was harder to utilize before. Next slide. So, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Go back. So here's just a very quick overview of the different bonuses. There's a domestic content bonus for 10%, energy communities bonus for 10%, and then environmental justice bonus for up to 20%. You can see in this slide or this chart over here, just a quick comparison of what it used to be, the base rate at 30%, and then what you could potentially receive if you stack all of these available bonuses. And I will say that the bonuses are optional, right? You can go in just with a straight base rate of 30% and then call it. You don't have to apply for the bonuses, but if you are eligible to meet them and you want to meet the requirements, then you certainly can. Next slide. This is just a quick illustration of what obtaining the bonuses might look like in terms of the increase to your renewable energy tax credit. If you start with a base of 345, if you double your credit percentage, you're going to double your energy tax credit. So it adds up pretty quickly. Next slide. And here's what I was talking about earlier. So if you develop or you install solar on the project, you can use that basis to generate both the renewable energy tax credit and the low-income housing tax credit. So in this example, we're assuming 60% credit percentage, assuming some of the bonuses. That generates $690,000 of renewable energy tax credits. It also generates $460,000 of LIHTC, which translates into $1.15 million of credits. And then you can see just a quick, assuming 90 cents on the dollar for those credits, you're getting equity back of about $1 million. So it could almost pay for itself, and it's a very valuable credit and incentive program to be aware of. Next slide. I'm just going to briefly go over some of these credit bonuses. Next slide. Don't mind. So domestic content. So this gives you a 10% boost if you purchase your system and it's manufactured domestically. And there's different. This is kind of a sliding scale as the time periods go on. So that's one of them. The second one, if you want to go to next slide, is an energy communities bonus, and this really depends on where your project is situated. There's a map available at the Department of Energy website if you want to take a look. And then next slide. So the third one, the environmental justice bonus, which provides up to 20% boost, is a little bit more tricky. You actually have to apply for this bonus, whereas the other bonuses are as of right. So this one you apply through the portal on the Department of Energy's website. It started in 2023. They're kind of wrapping up their 2024 allocation. If there's any left over, there'll be another, it will be carried forward to the year 2025. There is still capacity left, so if you do think that you could qualify under one of these bonuses, you still have time to apply for it. I'm going to be talking about the third category, as that's most applicable to our projects. This is applicable for rental projects that participate in a federal covered housing program, such as LIHTC, Project-Based Section 8, or a number of other federal programs. You get a 20% credit boost, but the kind of catch is that at least 50% of the financial value of the electricity must be allocated equitably among the occupants of the dwelling units. So maybe you're doing that already and it's not a big deal. If you're not, you just have to keep in mind that 50% of that value needs to go towards the residents in either forms of a bill credit or other benefits, which could include, job training, workforce development, and other things. That's a quick overview of the bonuses. I do want to briefly touch on this new way to access the credit, which came into play. So remember I said, tax credits typically only benefit projects that have tax liability. Well, the IRS has changed it to allow for elective pay, which allows tax-exempt and government entities to benefit from the tax credit by pretty much writing it off on their tax return, filing the tax return, and then getting refunded through that filing. So tax-exempt entities and government entities can now benefit, whereas they couldn't really benefit from this before. And then there's a new credit transfer or transferability that allows taxable entities to sell these tax credits on the open market, whereas before they were the only ones that could take advantage of the credit. So just utilizing different avenues to access the credit and benefit from these green technologies. I'm going to just very briefly talk about this if you go to the next one. So this is all to say there's certain tax considerations, especially if you're in a typical low-income housing tax credit partnership with a 99.99% investor ownership interest and a 0.01% GP ownership interest. I would just say if you're in that structure, if you're applying for typical tax credits, just check in with your financial consultant or your tax counsel to see if this is right for you. There's certain tax attributes that you have to forego. I'm not going to go into detail on this presentation, but if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out, or we can, you can talk to the experts to help you through that. And you can skip that. And I think you can skip that. I think that's all all I need to cover in this, just to take account our time limit. So thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. As you can see, there was a lot of information in this program. We have a few minutes left for Q&A. We did have a couple of questions that came in beforehand, so I'd like to ask those, and then I'll get to the Q&A box. So one of the questions that we had been hearing is, are these tax credits required to, are you required to take these tax credits if you are a property participating in GGRF? We know that GGRF can't be the only source of funding for a lot of these developments, but yeah, could you clarify kind of the role of the tax credits in combining with GGRF financing?
The tax credits that I just described are completely optional. You do not have, yeah. So if you don't want them, you don't have to take them or claim them rather.
For some of the other panelists, you know, other provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act have Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements as well as Build America, Buy America requirements. How are those being implemented in the in your financial products?
I can take the first pass at that from the power forward multifamily perspective, at least. We are expecting that both Davis-Bacon and Build America, Buy America will be required for any multifamily project accessing our funding. So with the initial projects that we're doing in our pilot phase, if you will, we're looking for projects that may have already been planning to be compliant with those federal requirements so that we can focus most explicitly on how to blend in the new aspects of GGRF into those deals, and then be able to share lessons learned from those experiences as we broaden our pipeline approach.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. I mean, I think ditto essentially. I think there is a question there. We're still trying to get clarity around BABA. I think Davis-Bacon, if it touches construction, will apply. There's clarity on that. I think with BABA, naturally occurring affordable or unsubsidized affordable does not have to require is not BABA compliant, so to speak, or does not have to comply with BABA, I should say. So that is an exemption there. But I think there is a question now whether multifamily is infrastructure and how subsidy, like what form of subsidy would trigger BABA. So if the project is receiving some type of other national versus state or local subsidy, does that trigger BABA? So I would just say that I think on the Davis-Bacon side, we have clarity. On the BABA side, we are still getting clarity from the EPA. But I think that any project that is unsubsidized would not have to comply with BABA.
We do have a question around the inclusion of fossil fuel equipment. Would including any sort of fossil fuel equipment preclude a project from engaging with these financing sources? Does it have to be all electric, or is there maybe scope for a little bit of flexibility on rehabs of existing properties that might have some of that equipment already in place?
So I can jump in. I think I got off mute before you, Krista. But so I think I think we're all kind of as an industry still trying to understand again what the requirements of the EPA. Obviously, we know greenhouse gas reduction is a requirement. I think as Climate United Fund, we have taken the stance that we will. Any project that is installing new fossil fuel equipment, we would not finance. And so even if those systems were financed separately outside of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, we still think that would perpetuate the reliance on fossil fuels, which kind of goes against the intention of these funds. It does seem like a lot of money when you see the B next to it, but it is a drop in the bucket of what we need. And so we really want to support those projects that are really reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as they can. I will say with our Save a Ton, that lowest threshold, that 20% energy savings, that does not require all electric. So for a project that just put in a new high efficiency gas boiler, whatever, 8 years ago, we would not require you to pull that out. You can leave that in. You just won't electrify at that time, but you would have to demonstrate that 20% energy savings.
Cool. I've got a couple questions here from an Alex Landsberg. Can you please tell us how you are working with your local organized electrical and plumbing mechanical industries in pursuing your electrification goals? Are you working with unions at all?
From the power forward perspective, LISC is taking the lead with us on workforce development, in particular markets around the country where we expect to have the greatest focus. And in those areas, yes, we are working with organized labor and really see them as essential to being able to move forward with the types of upgrades that are needed in buildings.
Cool. I've got a question from Leanna Huynh. Are public agencies purchasing solar battery systems on behalf of an affordable multifamily project eligible for the tax credit? And are the real estate tax credits prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements federal or state? Assuming federal. So I think you're still on mute, Jesse.
Sorry about that. Yes, they are Davis-Bake, again, federal prevailing wages. And yes, now nonprofits and government agencies can utilize this tax credit by direct pay. So that I think a lot of government agencies are trying to get in and utilize, do a lot of solar and battery upgrades now that they can and get a rebate for them.
We are almost at time, but if folks are willing to stay on, I'd like to try to get to the rest of the questions. But if you got to hop off, feel free to do so now. We do have a question from Michelle Williams. Who purchases renewable energy tax credits? Is the equity investment process similar to LIHTC?
Typically, yes, it is. If you are already in a LIHTC deal, you reach out to your investor and see if they have any appetite. It's been our experience that most do. That's an attractive tax credit because you can claim it all pretty much in the first year. So yes, that's the main buyers of the tax credit.
Cool. We've got a question from Heather Bromfield. Are there any minimum project sizes for the RATCs?
No minimum project sizes.
We got questions here from Mara Blitzer and Jay Marcus about the term sheets. When are the term sheets going to be available for each of the funds described today? And will the term sheets be sent out to those attending this training when they are completed?
Yeah, so our term sheets will be finalized, I would say, in the early fall. So what I guess the first day of fall is September 22nd. So I would say around that time, I would say end of September. And yes, we're happy to make those available. We can share those with you, Ian, and if you would be willing to share those with attendees.
Yep. Definitely willing to send things out to the attendees when this is all available. Also going to go ahead and answer Allie Campbell's question. Yes, a recording of this will be made available. We should be uploading it to our YouTube channel in the coming days. So let's see. Then I think that is getting us to our last question from Heather Bromfield. Oh, got another one there. Are RETCs for new construction only, or can they also be used for retrofits, rehabs?
They can also be used towards retrofits and rehabs.
Cool. And we got a question from Marie Gunter. Can these loans be utilized in conjunction with state incentives like energy smart homes, et cetera? The other programs that we mentioned at the top of this session.
For power,
Let's go ahead.
yeah, from the power forward perspective, we're designing ours to be subordinate to almost every other source of financing, and certainly are encouraging all local, state, federal sources to be combined in any way possible. So, yes.
Ditto.
I think layering is generally very much encouraged across the board. And then I think last question from Jay Marcus. Is there any sense of the cents on the dollar for the purchase of credits? What is the reporting period for that?
Yeah, we typically see them in the low to mid 90s. Just because, again, it is kind of an attractive credit. You can take it immediately, as opposed to low-income housing tax credits, which are spread out over a 10-year period. So say low to mid 90s, if not higher.
Okay. Cool. Well, I think with that, we are at a little bit over time. So I want to thank everybody again. A lot of really great information here today. We also, I'd like to remind everybody have the rest of our series coming up in the coming months, and as well as thank you to our sponsors and our program partners again. Wells Fargo Foundation, Energy Efficiency for All, LiveWhip, CAMR, Build, and Soma. and be on the lookout for our other sessions. So thank you all. I appreciate it, and hope you have a good rest of the day.